I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, I have to reschedule everything because this episode has to come out before New Year's.
So tell me, Maddie, how did you find our podcast? Like, how did you come across Alana and myself?
I can't remember if it was just, I feel like I found you guys through Instagram, and either it was because I was searching for like really cool entrepreneurs to reach out to, or you guys just happened to come up, like advertised to me through the algorithm. It was one of those two things. But when I saw your branding and everything, like I knew I had to reach out. I was like, this is so like deliciously curated. Everything is pink, so like it's already speaking to me.
Love
and
it.
then when I saw a couple of your guys' reels and I listened to an episode of the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, like I definitely want to reach out.
That's awesome. Well, it's good to know what we're doing is working. So
Yes.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, thanks for the compliment, because we work really hard to try and make everything like really digestible and, appealing to connect with people. Because like, sometimes things get so overcomplicated or over-engineered. So yeah, it's good to know that it resonated with you. And
definitely.
We're definitely,
I feel like it will definitely,
fans.
Yeah, I mean, it will resonate with like any of the girlies, I think. You know the vibes, you know what they want, and you're just giving the people what they want.
Yeah. And like, we are them as well, right? Like I think we sort of make no secret on our podcast. I think, similar to what you're kind of doing, it's like we're learning through meeting and talking to people and connecting, and I guess we're just pressing record on the conversations and letting everyone else like listen to them.
Yes.
But that's we're just kind of at the same stage. We're learning. So much of what we talk about on the podcast influences our own like business as well.
Totally.
So one of my like recent ventures that I started, which is Spring Street Style, I have taken so many nuggets out of like speaking to all these different entrepreneurs and what worked for them, and kind of learning from their mistakes. And you don't realize how much like goodness is actually in podcasts. Like,
yeah,
I definitely understand like the value for spending money on courses, and there's certain skills absolutely that you need to master as an entrepreneur, like Meta, Facebook ads. Like, take my money,
totally.
I need to understand them. But like there's certain things that you can just gain so much from like learning and speaking to other people and connecting. So that's definitely something that's like overlooked, and I see people just being so thirsty for knowledge. So definitely podcast is so untapped.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Anytime I interview somebody, I'm always learning something. And as much as this podcast, and I'm sure yours is too, is designed to help other people, selfishly, I learned so much. Like the other day, I interviewed a girl who's a professional organizer, and like I had to talk to her. I had to reach out and I had to be like, I need you to tell me everything, because like, what can I be doing better in my home? How can I be more organized? And like genuinely selfishly, I want to learn from this person. And if that helps everybody else, then I love that. But like a lot of the times, a lot of these conversations come out of me just like purely selfishly being like, oh, I think this is a really interesting person. I really want to get to know them and learn from them and learn their stories. And like, I think podcasting is such a great tool in that way, because you're just absorbing knowledge without even realizing that you're doing it.
100%, totally. And also, like, because we're based in Australia, so I'm in Sydney and Alana, my co-host, is in Melbourne. I think like podcasting is probably, as per usual, like 5 years behind where you guys are in the States as well. So like we're kind of getting to that point where it will sort of reach the next level. Like I think it's just so much more ingrained in the US and like cultural wise for learning and knowledge, and just like another medium that people take advantage of. But like here it's still just coming out of its infancy, I think.
Really? So do you think you guys have like positioned yourself in a really cool place to be able to like hit that first wave of like super big podcasts?
Absolutely. Like I think we're in a really good position to just really make a dent in the podcasting world, and then just all of the people that we're connecting with. It's a really good opportunity. Like, I don't think we're going to be, like Call Her Daddy kind of podcast here, but like, I think, we definitely can do something really cool in like that entrepreneurial, like business space, within Australia and our local market and New Zealand as well. So
How did you
I'm
get
excited
there?
to see.
What were like some of the major steps that took you guys to get there to allow you to be like in this position now?
Well, just taking risks, I think, is a big one, and like leaps of faith, right? Because I think that's really what sets like people who are in business and want to be in business apart, like those who kind of take the next step forward. It's like you're doing risks, and calculated risks, definitely.
Right.
But also sometimes it is a leap of faith, right? Because you want to stand out and you want to be different. So you kind of got to do something that other people are not doing. So we started our business together. So Alana and I co-founded My Founder Hub, which is also the Founder Hub podcast. So a bit of a mouthful there. And really, we had come from our own business ventures, different backgrounds. So Alana's background is like product development and my background is marketing. So like lots of really nice synergies and crossovers.
Yeah.
And, I'd had started a couple of like my own side hustles, things like didn't work. But I think I was always never putting 110% of myself in there. Whereas when we kind of came together, we met on a business online coaching course. So always put yourself out there because you never know who you'll meet. Like it was just a chance, and, we kind of clicked. And we knew that there was an opportunity to help other people sort of solve for a problem that we'd been facing. So in our own businesses, we'd always, wanted to produce products and, start new ideas and manufacture. But we'd always, come to like, oh, you need like 10,000 minimum order quantities, or just, huge barriers. Like, first of all, who's going to pay for that? And then second of all, who's going to house that much product when you're just kind of dabbling in a side hustle or an idea, right? Like, where on earth are you going to put that? Because it definitely doesn't fit in my apartment, right? So that's like, we just wanted to help people, and it came out of that passion point, right? So really it's driven from like, we know other people have been facing what we've been facing. We spoke to so many people at networking events. I think that was kind of the nice timing of it. We were just coming out of like COVID, which obviously you kind of can't go without mentioning most of the time these days. So it was great. We were connecting and meeting with people, and we're like, you know what, we know we've got something. And out of there, the agency side of our business was born, but so much of that connection and conversation that we learnt from, we're like, we really want to do this as a podcast. And like, we're great at talking and having conversations and, connecting. So that's kind of how we made the decision to do a lot of this. And I will definitely say the podcast was like a one afternoon idea. I was like, I'm so enjoying talking to people and connecting with people, because in the course that we did, so the online business course we did, one of the challenges and asks was that every week you would connect with 3 different people over just like a coffee date per se. So it was someone that you knew that was in your network was one of them. And then another one was someone that you had to like totally reach out to, like cold connection, and just like, whether it's set up like an in-person or a Zoom or some kind of coffee date. So I think that was really where the desire to connect and learn and just kind of keep that going came from, because we thought, if we're spending so much time and energy connecting with these people, again, selfishly, we loved it, but I was also like, there's so many other people who are going to take something from this as well. So that was kind of how it all sort of sparked this journey that we're really on now, for use of another cliche word.
And now, interestingly, after you came out with Spring Street, I'm curious to know, like, did you answer your own questions about how to work with manufacturing, minimum order quantities and stuff for your new business? How did you work through that?
Yeah. So like, that's such a good question, because I don't think I would have launched or started this business in the way that I have like just 12 or 18 months ago. So many nuggets that I took from podcasts and meeting with people, I applied into the business. So from manufacturing, I think my biggest takeaway was everything is a negotiation. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So I definitely made contact with a lot of suppliers. I did my own legwork. I guess I was my own client in a way. And it was a new industry for me. So I was making contact with a lot of manufacturers for the first time. It wasn't any sort of our existing contacts that we have, because a lot of what we do at the Founder Hub is really like beauty and apparel, clothing. So that was an interesting journey. I did lots of sampling, and I definitely came across the like, oh, you need to order a minimum of 5,000 of these or 2,500. And I'm like, what am I going to do with so much stock? Again, I don't have the space, and I don't want to spend that much money on something that I'm trialing. So
Totally.
I kind of, went in, asked the question and went back and forth, and, we've gotten down to a couple of hundred for, color styles, and, different styles we wanted to launch. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway. Everything is a negotiation. Whereas I definitely didn't have that mentality, say, 18 months ago. So big learning that you can go in, ask the question, and they want to work with you. Ultimately, they want to do business too. And they, if you're working with a really good quality, reputable manufacturer, they're going to know that if they're doing a great job providing you a really good quality product, you're going to grow your business, and your business with them is going to also grow. So we had a lot of those conversations. Right. What are we doing to start our business? So, they don't do a lot in sort of Australia and New Zealand. So, kind of really took them on the journey of what my vision was. So yeah, I'm really lucky with who we've ended up, and yeah, super grateful to just have those really open and honest, transparent conversations with them.
How did you find them? Through network also, or did you do some Google research or something?
Google research, definitely lots of Google research. I also, like every kind of product entrepreneur, sort of started out down the Alibaba route. So I scouted a few people there, but then I definitely went into looking them up. Yeah, so I went into looking them up on Google, because I'm very kind of hesitant with Alibaba. As you know, a lot of the time you're sort of dealing with agents who sort of look after a couple of different manufacturers, etc. So it was, I didn't feel really trustworthy about just, doing that. So I definitely ordered some samples from Alibaba and a couple of different people, but I kind of kept digging and digging to find where they were originally, coming from. And I ended up making just direct contact with the manufacturer and the factory themselves, which is...
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, so I deal with them directly. We speak on the WeChat very regularly, and I found that's the best way to deal with them as well. So yeah, super responsive, and just cutting out going through a third party platform is really key.
Totally.
So yeah, and again, so much of that I learnt in our own business and how we've sourced our own reputable manufacturers, because when you're working with clients, it's so important. You just cannot leave anything to chance, and just ghost people that you're dealing with. So yeah, we definitely get down to the source for people, because we also deal with couple of people there, we are able to negotiate better. Again, skills of learning along the way, and getting better prices, because we bring clients to them as well. So, I guess that's kind of a one kind of positive and pro to dealing with someone like us as an agency that is acting for you, because we sort of do it all the time. So we do have a little bit more leverage power with them.
So for your agency, you guys help new businesses grow and start, or do you help them in specific areas?
Yeah, so a bit of both in terms of starting, but also expanding. So in terms of starting out, so if someone has an idea for a product, we can definitely partner with them And I always say we sort of partner with them as an extension of their team, both from like a product development perspective, and then also from a supply perspective, because we deliver product to them wherever kind of their choice, obviously into a warehouse or just into their home and their garage, depending how and where they're starting off. So it's kind of a full end-to-end service that we offer in that perspective. So yeah, we definitely try to help new businesses, and then also for anyone who has an existing business but they want to expand into a new category, different formats, for example. So if they do have a beauty brand but they want to start doing cosmetic cases, for example, or different beauty tools, and it might sort of not be their bread and butter because they make serums or oils, etc. We can definitely help them extend and look for someone to grow sort of their ideas in that perspective as well. So yeah, we kind of cater to both of businesses no matter where they're at, and then so we can also help them, again, sort of 360 and take it to market as well. So yeah, we love working with people, and again, being an extension of their team and their vision, because ultimately what we want them to do is to sell that product and come back and reorder, because we look after sort of that reordering process as well for them.
That's cool. So you guys act as part of their team and you help them through the strategic process of either starting or expanding in a new market. You help guide them in terms of logistics of starting or expanding into new brands. So like if we take the example of someone who did serums and they want to go into hair care products or something, you help them like source manufacturers or labs, and you help them through that process. Do you also help them with like the marketing aspects?
Not at the moment, it's not, but it is something we're considering, because we've had a couple of the clients we've taken on asked us if we can help them launch. So, there's definitely a possibility to help create a launch plan and a strategy for them there, so we can kind of support how they go to market. So, yeah, it's something we're probably going to look at expanding in 2024, which is around the corner at the moment. So, yeah, we'd love to help them.
That's awesome. You have a lot of experience going to market, and I think go-to-market strategies are so interesting to me because it's like you've put so much work in on the back end, and now you want to have a successful launch. Do you have any advice for people who are going to market? Like, what strategies do you recommend that they employ? Any like do's or don'ts that are on the top of your list?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And look, it will probably vary, and you need to tailor it slightly depending on what, product industry you're launching. But in terms of, what works and what doesn't, you can't kind of have this conversation without talking about social media, definitely, of course. For me, what makes a memorable brand that connects is definitely showing up and showing your face in some way or other. I know that there's so much apprehension around doing this, and even I cringe at myself sometimes. But, if you're sort of connecting with that, one person to start with, and then one becomes 10 and 100, etc. If you've never started, you're not going to grow. So I think that's something that all brands that are memorable and do well, like there is always someone who's showing up, and you can see the passion that they have in their brand and the products that they create. I think that's definitely so important. One thing that I have implemented in my recent launch is PR. The value and importance that you get out of that launch, you never get your launch opportunity back. And that was something that I learned along the way, definitely took from the podcast, that new news, that hype and that excitement from your product and from you yourself, because that, PR is a story that you're telling, like both of those, I think are so key. So for us, we're definitely focusing on PR within Australia, and then also a little bit into New Zealand, because we do deliver into New Zealand, and that's a kind of obviously makes sense for us being based here. So really important. We've literally, I think, started about a week or 2 weeks ago with what we're doing, and seeing some, results already coming through. So I would definitely advise, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You don't need to get an agency. So many great freelancers and people that have connections or that are starting their own businesses out that you can also use. So don't just kind of think of it as like, oh, I've got to go to an agency. It's a really, different, clever, smart, more affordable way to do things. So, that's another kind of way to go about that. And then, definitely think about like what your digital presence is. So your website is so important. Like, make sure you're using like Shopify. Your website is like easy to navigate. Your descriptions are spot on. Your photography is great. I invested, a bit of money in getting great photography for Spring Street. How you tell your story through a campaign, through video in your website is so important, because if social platforms disappear or the Instagrams go down, your website is always going to be a hub that people come to.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't necessarily own those followers and those people who, like your page, etc. So that's definitely kind of a key top 3 for me. And I was going to say definitely special mentions for even within socials. I have not gotten to TikTok yet, but the power of that platform, I'm definitely a consumer of it because I'm just like learning so much about it. It just can't be overlooked. Again, it's got to be right for your product and your market, because not everything may necessarily work on TikTok, but I think that's really important. And then the last one is emails. I'm doing this myself and working with someone to help guide me, but the power of having your email flows and your website set up properly is so important. Having people come to your website, capturing their details, how you connect with them. They're already a warm lead customer. It is so much more affordable to keep that customer and to regain them again than it is to, find those new customers if you're doing, sort of cold ads. So that is something that I'm learning so much about. And, depending on sort of who you listen to, most of your sort of sales, if you've got like an online e-com store, about 30 to 50% of your sales should actually be coming from, your database. So you really need to leverage that. So those are definitely a couple of like sound bites of things that we're doing. Again, I've got a list as long as my arm of things that I need to do. And like, equally the idea is to kind of take it to where I want it to be. But it's so important that you just pick a few and that you do a really amazing job with them. And that's how you kind of start to create those memorable interactions with, your customers, and how they, come to you via whether, it's socials or email or your website. What you really want to do is you want to make sure that you just make such a banging impression no matter where they come to you from.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that you said were really interesting. And one of them, like if you have somebody's email, you have a customer. And if you can wow them consistently with quality email newsletters or campaigns of some sort, like if you can provide real value in that space, I think you're leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else, because most of the time people are so inundated in their emails and like they don't really care to look. But if you can get eyes in that space that care and actually like click through, I think that's a major win, because that demonstrates like really great customers. And I'm also a little bit curious to know too what exactly your PR strategy looked like, because this is something that I'm also still learning. And like, what specifically were you guys doing ahead of the Spring Street launch?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, because we sort of built this together with our PR partner. So we're focusing on 2 things for Spring Street. So number one is, the product and the story that the product shares. So, it very much, in terms of our first launch, is focused on, that younger market. So we're focusing on like kids, tweens, teens. And that's definitely the nature of, the color schemes we've gone for and the products that we are launching. So again, our products are really versatile. You can kind of, use our pouches for, anything from like makeup, travel, but we're pitching them at the moment as like great sort of pencil cases for back to school. And I guess just for context, because we are in Australia and our seasons are different, our back to school timing is end of January, beginning of February. So that's when the school year starts. So I guess it's perfect timing for Christmas, and then the kind of back to school season is during January. So that was a big influence in terms of what I launched with initially. And so that's a lot around the storytelling, that it is, great for back to school, organization, customization, personalization, all, really great things that resonate with that market, and also with parents. It's functional. So yes, we obviously want them to have that desirability, and, my girlfriend has it, my friend has it, and I sort of, I want the same pencil case to school. But for parents, it's very much that functional message too. So that's kind of what we're starting with our product. And then, there is a part of that strategy that is also linked to me and my background, my experience in marketing, my experience with my founder hub, and a podcast as well, and then how that translated into this business that I have launched. So those are kind of the two big parts of our strategy and what we're focusing on. So yeah, and just trying, as I said, PR is very much about connecting with stories. I know I speak to people and they're just like, I want my product mentioned in like Vogue or a magazine. Like, I just want my product. But, I think people need to just take it like one layer down. And why would people connect with your product? Like, why would people buy your product over a competitor's or anyone else's? So just, like anything at the moment, it's so important to really tell that story and what, customers are connecting with. So yeah, I'm really excited. As I said, it's very early days for our PR, but we're starting to see some, really good kind of like green shoots and interest come through. So yeah, kind of watch this space in the next month or two.
I just want to know what kind of tools you give to your clients to help them with storytelling. Because like for me, thinking about marketing the podcast, etc., like growing a social media community around it, how, like, what tools do you give your clients to help them get better at telling stories around their product or service?
Yeah. I love that question, because everyone will do it differently, based on, again, product category, how comfortable they are getting in front of the camera. So, one of the things and one of the tools that we learned really early on is, break down what your own story is. And like, we mean very much like going back to, who are you? What do you stand for? How does your business link into that as well? Because, there is such a deep connection to what you end up doing and why, etc. So I think having all of that, written out and well thought through, they kind of start to create their own stories. You realize really quickly. So, we're able to guide people and unpack their own story. So, I guess quite recently, Maddie, through the podcast, we've had a couple of people approach us for like coaching and mentoring. So we have been doing this with a few clients who are building their own businesses and going into brand new categories. And they're really lost in terms of like, this is who I am as an everyday person, because they're sort of starting it as a side hustle. And then this is this business that I want to launch in. And we're just like so polar opposite. Like, how do I do the leap from, me every day to this? And really it is that story, like understanding who they are clearly, why they wanted to do this business. And then, you can start to really build content around it. And, again, obviously socials lends itself really perfectly for this. And, not just the usual like Instagram, Facebook, but also like LinkedIn and TikTok. Like, there's so many different platforms that you can position yourself and almost just evolve into telling that story, because it takes time, and you've got to plant the right seeds. So those are definitely key things that we advise. And, learning how to use Canva and
Yeah.
creating beautiful, and I don't mean like aesthetically beautiful content. I mean like just great content that's like educational, that like cuts through, that resonates, that you're like so super proud of. That's, you know, what you need to start building and just start planting those seeds, right? So
Yeah.
that's really important. And people, as I said, like they'll tell their story in different ways. You know, some people might want to sort of jump straight into like launching and then telling their story. Other people sort of build that community and that audience, and they've just got a little bit more of like a traction with kind of building it behind them. So it really depends what you feel comfortable with. But as long as you sort of know your story and then where you want to go, I think, yeah, having those goals is also like equally important, because you've got to know roughly where you're going. Like the map will change of how you get there, but if you know where you're roughly aiming to, I think that really kind of helps to build that content and those stories.
Could you give some examples of like what, okay, potentially, let's say, for example, like you're a new beauty brand and you're launching, what kind of goals should you be setting around launch? Like what do those look like?
Yeah, I think that is so important, because sometimes we get carried away with all like, you know, the shiny objects of like, you know, launching a new business, and you kind of forget on launch night when you're going live, what is it exactly that you want to launch. So something that I did was, as small or big as it might be, just like take the time to, you know, I sort of just started like a Google sheet of like, you know, how many products do I want to launch? How much are they going to, you know, cost me? How much money am I actually making out of that? And equally, like, how much money am I going to spend on this, you know, launch in particular? You know, am I doing some socials? Am I doing content? Am I doing some paid ads? Like, I think it's just so important to document those as goals, and then also equally into the numbers, because you start to get an understanding of like, okay, I totally reckon I can launch, you know, I can sell 10 in my first, you know, day launch, you know, first day I go live. I can sell 100. And it just kind of gives all of, you know, the effort and what you're working so hard for, like a bit more tangibility. So I found that worked for me. Just having a bit of a template. Like my husband's an accountant, so he's very helpful in keeping me accountable with my numbers, because I'm a marketer. So I'm sort of on the other, like spending, return, and, you know, investing.
Yeah.
So he's really good at like helping me through that, because I can easily get away with like the shiny stuff. So it is important to know your numbers and keep on track. So yeah, big thing, write those down. Again, it doesn't matter how small or big they are. Like, you know, no brand started by launching, you know, 1 million products on like their first day, on their first go. So it's also just really satisfying to keep that all documented, because you're going to be in such a different position in 6 months, 12 months, and 5 years time, and just being able to kind of see that evolution, you know, is just it's grounding, and also it kind of helps you see the progress that you've made, because sometimes we're so deep in the stage we're at, we don't see how far we've come.
Yeah, I think I really want people to understand what a first launch really looks like, because on social media, you follow a girl with 125,000 followers. She's launching a new product because she's been a successful creator for a long time, and now she's coming out with her first product. And so her first launch, she's, you know, posting a social media Instagram story showing her product page, and it's like the lines are going everywhere, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful. Love you guys so much." You know, and then it's like, that is not what most people's first launch looks like. And I think it's so important to not just like understand that probably isn't what your first launch is going to be like, but I think around goal setting realistically and also aspirationally, like I'm not saying, you know, like say you're only going to sell 5 if you really want to sell 100, if you think you can sell 100, but more like being intentional about that first launch, really setting up, like you said, a template of how you want it to go. So then that way you do feel satisfied when you've hit those goals.
Absolutely. And I think you just said it so well, because like we do live in this kind of false economy of, someone's a content creator and they, post whatever wellness like content, and then all of a sudden they're kind of launching some like wellness vitamin and like, oh, my sales are going wild and like, thanks so much guys, I love you. And like,
Yeah.
that's great. And like equally, I don't want to discount that, because I'm sure that content creator has been like working so hard and they've, built their following and they have built their community for so many years in the background. They're just like, their product business, pardon me, is starting at a really different point in their journey.
Exactly.
But I do think there's probably something to learn from those content creators in the sense of, if you're not afraid to put yourself out there, they start building the hype. They're dropping hints. They're, taking you behind the scenes. Like there's so much content that they are sharing. And as I said, you might only start out with like 5 of your friends that are, probably in your target audience caring, but those 5 friends will share it with, another 5 that are probably in your target audience too. So there's so much that you can take from them, and you can start building your community and resonating, because, in 5 years' time, you might be doing a launch that's equally going to 150,000 people. Definitely. And you could be in the same position. So I really do think there's a lot to learn from, those content creators that are starting further down the line as well. That,
Yeah. It's almost just, to me, it's one of the things that I love about creators is it's just a different business strategy. All you're doing is you're just starting out by building the community, and then you launch a product, where a lot of the times you start with a product, you launch, and then you build a community around that product. So like at the end of the day, you're both getting to the same place. It's just about where you want to spend your time initially. So like most creators spend their time making content, building a community, building that trust with the people that follow them. And then through that, they have a unique ability to do a lot of market testing. They can really understand whether or not this is something that their followers want, and then they can provide them with exactly what they want. And it's a very unique way to build a business. And I think it's super smart. And I think if you're willing to invest the amount of time that takes, because sometimes it takes years to get there, like your first launch will and undoubtedly be successful because you have 125,000 people waiting in line to buy something from you. But if you want to go about it a different way and you already have a product idea, but you don't have a massive amount of followers, there's another option for you to go to, which is the one we were discussing before, which is like set up a template, understand what you want from in terms of goals from this launch specifically. And I'm really glad that you broke it down for us and you helped us understand like what exactly should be in those goals, because otherwise it's sort of this ambiguous thing where you're like, well, I want to sell stuff on my first launch. You're like, I want a bunch of people on my website and I want it to be successful. But like, what does success mean to you at this stage in your business is going to be different than somebody else in a different stage of their business.
Absolutely. And I think we have to be realistic with ourselves to write it down and to own it and articulate it. Like whatever that looks like, as I said, whether it's 10 products or 100 products, like it's your version of success, and where you kind of take it is limitless, right? It's like the beauty of owning your business. But yeah, and again, like there's so much power in writing down goals. I think there's that kind of that golden stat that if you write it down, you're like 5 times more likely to actually go back and achieve it, and you look at it and it's real. And then I think that just kind of doubles again if you're actually writing it into like a pen and a paper versus just like writing it into like your laptop. So I can't stress enough. Like I'm a list write organization person, and that just always sticks with me when I write something down to see it through and to get it done. So it is really important to document where you start, because you can't measure where you're going without having that starting point. And again, for me, that was really important, not only on how many units I wanted to sell, but also, what my margins were and how much profit I'm actually going to make from this. Like, I think, you invest a lot of money up front. So it's not profit in the sense of, oh, I'm pulling money out of my business tomorrow, because you're just continuously investing in your business for a while. But you need to know exactly how much. Yeah, it takes a while to kind of get to that stage. So, but you need to know exactly how, like, what your like reward for effort is for what you're doing.
Mm.
So, and that's kind of key.
Yeah, I like that term, reward for effort. I think that's important in the early stages because I think it's very illuminating early on, like how, how your market is receiving your product, whether it's going well or not, and to be realistic about the fact that it will take time to potentially like have a profitable business. And like that's not a bad thing. You look at a company like Uber and they were only profitable like a couple of years ago. So there is a lot of opportunity to not necessarily to continue to like even just break even, but to get to that point and to say from the very beginning, okay, here's where I am, here's what I've invested in my business. Here is what I'm looking for out of the first launch, being realistic about that and saying, how much quote unquote profit or reward for effort do I want to get from this stage of the business, and then even saying like, how, and then calculating based off of that first launch, I feel like is really smart to be like, okay, if we continue on this trajectory, based off of the launches that I have planned down the line, 3 or 4 launches from now, where will we be and what projected rate can we potentially become profitable, or whatever goal makes sense for you. And side note, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation right now because it is goal setting season with the holidays and like once, that sweet spot
Totally.
After Christmas, but before New Year's when everybody's not working and you have all this time to just think about what you want the next year to look like and what kind of goals you want to be setting. So I think this is just like the perfect time to be discussing this particular episode. So then that way, like people can really start to think about it. And I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, I have to reschedule everything because this episode has to come out before New Year's. So then that way like, people can hear this because I think this is important.
And honestly, like goal setting, and Alana and I do it at our business for my founder hub and having like strategy days for the year ahead. But then I also quite like to do them for each quarter. So we like to do like 90-day plans. And it's something that I carry into Spring Street because as like, we were just talking, if you don't have like a map or a vision of where you're going, it's definitely not going to happen. So 24, and then what am I going to do each quarter to like help me get there? It's really, it just breaks it down into those like bite-sized, like actionable steps that you can do. So I'm huge, and my like, as you kind of nailed it, because like my in between like really awkward quiet period, like after like Christmas between New Year's, where like no one knows what they're actually supposed to be doing with their life because it's awkwardly quiet.
Yes.
Like okay.
Yes.
Like I just like write it down, like pull out a diary. I'm still like a big like paper journal and paper diary. I don't know, love pen and paper, and I've always loved a diary. So
me too.
Always will have that. Good or bad habit. So it's just like pull it out, and it doesn't have to be set in stone. Like I tell you, most of the time I'm writing it in like pencil because you rub it out, you start, you change plans, but you've kind of got to have that starting point to know what you're doing. So like 100% get out like piece of paper and just do it. So yeah, it's important.
I'm so curious to know what your guys' strategy sessions look like, because this is something that I'm struggling with right now for the podcast. Like, I know that I'll be taking that week to do goal setting for my personal life and then also for my professional life. And this right now is my side hustle, but it's what I wanted to become like my full-time job. And to think about strategy for the next year is a little bit overwhelming. Like, I'm not exactly sure what areas to hone in on, how I should be breaking it down. And like looking at what I have now is easy because I can just look at what I have now. But it's like, how can I be setting realistic goals for myself in the future? I'm not really sure where to go with that.
Yeah. Look, it's hard. And I think you can't, like, if you don't know where you're going, that's definitely a challenge, or you don't know where you want to take it. I would probably say, look at people that are maybe further along in the journey than you are. Like if podcasting is like where you want to go, where are they at? How have they built those businesses and what could be realistic for you to do in the next 12 months? I always say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And we live in a world where so like people are sharing and they're letting us into their world. So try and find that person that you get inspiration from and that you aspire to be. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having someone to look up to. And just get guidance and inspiration from. I think that's really powerful. But, if you do have a list of goals and ideas, even just like a revenue goal that you want to get to, how does that actually translate into products, campaigns, activities and do it quarter by quarter? Like, I don't know, for me, there's just kind of a magic of like 90 days, very much like ingrained into like my marketing background and, calendars that you've got and how you work with. So it's just part of how I approach things now. But, what are the different channels and what are you doing in those different channels? Again, I'm happy to sort of share a bit of a base template that I use, and I, definitely share with a couple of our mentoring and coaching clients too. So if it's going to be helpful for people, it's just a super basic skeleton to just really inspire people to get thinking right.
Yeah, thank you. That's so helpful, because I mean, even just that initially is like really illuminating, and it does help me, I think, like point in the right direction, because you're right, like I know vaguely where I'd like to be. I'd like to get this to a point where it's paying my bills and like we get to make this full time. But those intermediate steps to get there, and then thinking about it on a quarterly basis, I've never worked in that way, but I know everybody else does. And like my full-time job obviously works in that schedule. And I think thinking about it that way even helps to further break down into manageable times. Cause like for me personally, I do monthly goals and like monthly habits that I'm trying to build and keep. And then like in my personal life, so it's something as small as like my workout, personal bests and things like that throughout the month. But to then apply them in 90-day cycles for the business is where I need to start moving. And like, I think it's just honestly all for me, like about learning more applicably how to run a business. It's just not something I'm super familiar with. I've obviously never done it before. And like learning these cycles, or how to properly goal set for a business, and like how to strategize for a business. These are all something that I've thought about, and I've been like, oh, one day I'll do that. But like what that actually looks like is something that I'm still learning. So I appreciate your insight in this, because it's already helping to like illuminate some of this sort of stuff that's just been in my mind and like in the ether.
Yeah. And look, it's something that I think as business owners, we like learn to do and we get better at, because it kind of goes back to, whether you're like working on your business and in your business, and you very much do both when you're first starting out. It's just the nature of, being an entrepreneur, whether you're doing it like with a co-founder or just looking after so many different areas of your business. But working on your business and just being able to elevate yourself out of the day-to-day, whether you're, answering emails or trying to schedule, more interviews for the podcast, it's like literally just taking like 45 minutes out of the hour to be like, what does, whether it's next year or next quarter, like look like, and what are two things that I can do, and then maybe like check in on those two things in like a fortnight, in between all of the stuff that you're sort of doing when you're in running of the business. So I find that kind of helps a little bit. Like I wish I was able to dedicate way more time, but when you're so in it, you can't. But just like take little chunks of time to start building those habits, because once you build your business as you want to that, full-time level, being able to do that more is where you're going to see those opportunities like continue to kind of expand and open for you more and more.
Yeah, and like where I'm at now, I feel like I'm enjoying the journey of the learning experience, and like kind of taking it slow in that like more meaningful. I think becoming an overnight success would be incredibly overwhelming, because like to your point, like my strategies are not in place, my processes are not in place, like I have not had any experience. And taking the time, every single day, even if it's just in 45-minute chunks, to build that habit and to get into the mindset of running a business this way is going to be so much more helpful in the long run because it sets you up for a strong foundation, and you're not just like running around with your hair on fire because you've had the time to learn through experience.
On it, like that is the biggest, like absolute biggest nugget right there, Maddie. You need like, as much as we all hate and cringe, but we need to like make mistakes. Like we need to stuff up, and you need to be like, oh, won't be doing that again. Like that's a learning.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Someone down the track is going to come and tell you like, oh, we should do this or we should do that. And you're going to be like, no, I've tried that and it didn't work. And that's how you build your confidence, your own, like, you know, and credibility as well, by just learning. And like all of those people who are overnight success, they've like opened and run 10 businesses and they failed and sucked at them. That's why they have the overnight success, because they learned from it and they're implementing it. So
yeah,
you hit the nail on the head for me. That's huge.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I think this is something that maybe in my since I'm getting on in years now and I'm learning and I'm getting older, and like the more
you are not
years go by, I know, the more the time goes by, the more I'm sort of just learning to enjoy the process. Like a year ago, I was like, I got to get thousands of followers tomorrow, otherwise like I'm not successful. And I think that leads to a lot of confusing messaging for your marketing because you're just trying everything, which I think you should try lots of different things. Like, don't get me wrong. But I think if you have an idea that you want and you're trying to make that successful and you are just out there like trying to skip steps or not enjoying the journey and enjoying the process and all of those learning lessons that come within that, I think that people will see that and it won't resonate with them, as opposed to as an entrepreneur, when you have the mindset of I'm here, I show up every day and I do what I need to do every day and I learn every day. It has such a different appearance externally that I think people tend to resonate with more. Like I feel like it's easier for people to get behind you and to root for you as opposed to the alternative.
I absolutely agree. You can, even though, you know, social media is a small snippet of what people share with you and let you into their world, you can tell the difference with someone who is real, is authentic and passionate about their business and like what they're actually building, versus someone who is coming from a place of disorganization, not passion, not passionate, or you know desperation, etc. Like you can very quickly identify that in the people that you follow. So yeah, it just comes from a completely different way, and people connect and resonate so so differently to those types of you know, entrepreneurs or people they follow and admire.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because it's, you know, Christmas is only a couple weeks away now. And so I'm really excited to sit down during that time and like really think about what I want the next quarter to look like. And then like working backwards from there to set up daily, weekly tasks, goals, etc., to align with that and help to build it. And, you know, takeaway from today is really enjoy the journey because that it's a never ending one. It's one that's always happening, and it's at whatever stage of business you're at is still a journey, and like there is no destination. And I feel like you're a great example of that. You have started so many things that have grown and like allowed you to get to where you are now. And it's just so interesting because, you know, you've had my founder hub for a while, you have the podcast, and then now you have a new business, and there's always something to learn from there. And there's always like more journey to be had.
Yeah. And yes, thank you. Very kind of you. And I have learned so much along the way. Like I've had things that didn't work as well. And I think that's what people need to be conscious of. Like, you know, people curate what they want you to see and believe. But it's because I failed and learned from things that didn't work that I am able to sort of, to look back and continue to grow on it. And I think one thing, Maddie, is like we're so scared sometimes, as much as, we love the behind the scenes, but we're scared to let people really in on the behind the scenes. So, take them on that journey of what you're building and wherever you're going for, this kind of next stage of your chapter. Like, don't be afraid to really show people, like, like I was out yesterday all day at a 40-degree day. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. I'm going to guess like over 102, just based on like rough conversion, at a Christmas market, because it is the middle of summer here, because like I knew there was going to be like the right target market, the right people there. And, even if I wasn't selling or making money, like I was handing out flyers and I was telling everyone about my brand and what I've launched and, who I am. Like, that stuff like isn't necessarily the sexy stuff or the hustle stuff, but it's real. And we have to let people in on that, because it's what's going to move your business forward.
Yeah, totally. I think that's, like, I think I might get off and make like a quick TikTok after we chat, because I've been really busy with the podcast, which is great. And I'm so grateful for that attention that it's been getting in terms of requests for interviews. And like, it's exactly what I wanted. Like, it's best case scenario. But at the same time, I was starting to feel burnout, because I was having like 6 podcasts scheduled a week. And like, I was doing them right after work, or I was doing them on the weekends, like 2 or 3 on the weekends. And it was like, I went to my facial yesterday, and my lovely facialist was like, let's just not talk for this duration. Because normally she and I chat. And she's like, let's just not talk. And she just let me like fully die on the table and like become in a coma. And it wasn't until she let me do that I really realized just like how tired and how like burnt out I was being. And I was like, whoa, so like, this is why I'm telling you the stories, because I'll probably go and make a TikTok about this now, because it is part of the journey, and it is like about as real as it gets.
Yeah, and so sometimes you don't even realize, like you probably didn't realize like just how exhausted you were from talking, and you're like, I just have no more words like left in the tank. Like, just let me be for the next hour, please. So, it's good. You need self-care. Like, I know it is a very overused and hyped word, but like, definitely, let yourself like fill up over the holiday period, because if you like, there's so much to do in like a big 2024, you've got to be ready and set for it. And you can only see that when you step away from things, and you stop using your words, and you can sometimes build, I think, from an empty mind.
Yes, 100%. And it's like, it just made me realize that I needed to have better systems in place during the week to support all the work that I'm doing. Because I pride myself on the fact that I'm like a pretty good with self-care. Like, I exercise on a regular basis. I do all the things that you're supposed to do. But I think it's also important to remember that as things change, so does your structures need to change to continue to support you. So like, as great as you think you might be, it's true, sometimes you don't realize, and you're just pushing through until somebody gives you the space and is like, why don't you just maybe not speak for an hour and a half and like see how you feel afterwards. And then you're like, whoa, there's like something has to change here.
Absolutely. Oh my, and stop doing 6 podcasts like a week. That's insane. That's crazy. Wow.
It was wild. It was crazy. I was like, maybe this is like,
I feel tired after 2.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because it's like, I love doing this, and like, especially great conversations leave me feeling energized. So I was like, oh yeah, like 6 podcasts, but not every single one is like this, where it's, we're going back and forth and we're vibing and we're learning. Like, it's not always this way, and sometimes those ones are harder than others, and you just never know what you're going to get sometimes until you start talking. And then suddenly, like, a week goes by and I'm deceased.
I love that you like articulated it in that way, because it's so true. Like, some are just require so much more of you than others. And if you don't vibe, or if you just sort of don't flow off each other, or sometimes we've had tech that just like doesn't work in our favor, it's just so much
Totally.
harder, and you feel really drained and exhausted afterwards, and just it's hard to kind of get other people to understand that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And this is a great episode for the people who are listening, because you are getting insight into what it's like to be a podcast interviewer and interviewee in like a way that I don't think that a lot of people chat about, at least not the podcast that I listen to, don't ever talk about this. So I think this is a good place for us to close, because we just dropped some hot tea. So let's drop the bomb and then like run away.
Done. I love it. It was so good, Maddie. Honestly, like, yeah, this was so fun, and we definitely vibed. It was awesome energy. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.